Alright, guys. I'm making these videos really quickly. I have like an hour and I have homework to do. There's a lot going on right now. But we're going to start off really quickly. We're going to get right to it. We have potential tropical cyclone 9, which is in the Western Caribbean right here. This is supposed to develop and move into the Gulf of Mexico and become a threat for the Gulf Coast around the end of this week. And right now we have Hurricane John, which is rapidly intensifying off the coast of Mexico and should make a landfall in Oaxaca, Mexico, soon, within the next 12 hours. It's already a Cat 2. It's probably already making a speed run to Category 4 status. It will probably be a Cat 3 very soon, and it will probably be at least a Cat 4 at landfall, maybe a Cat 5. This could be another Otis situation. Just 6 hours ago, this was a tropical storm, so it's very important that we keep an eye on that. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with John first, which is here. John rapidly intensifies to a Category 2 hurricane. This update by the NHC was released 1 hour ago. So right now, damaging hurricane force winds, life-threatening storm surge, flash flooding are expected in ports of southern Mexico. What we are seeing right now, at least from the key conditions, John's rapidly intensifying. John this morning was a tropical storm. Last night it was a tropical depression. The storm is already much more intense than forecast. At this time, yesterday, it was supposed to be a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Right now, it's almost a major hurricane that is about to make landfall within the span of 12 hours, and it can easily be much stronger than what it is right now. That is the main thing to take away of. The storm is becoming much stronger than what was initially forecast, so right now you have to prepare. I do not believe there's much time to evacuate in southern Mexico, where the storm is about to make landfall. You have to prepare for a major hurricane the best you can and rush your preparations to completion right now. In addition to that, heavy rainfall along the coast of southern Mexico. Mexico is expected to be 20 to 30 inches of rain right along the coastline due to the heavy mountainous terrain. As John's moving in as it's intensifying, as John moves in, the heavy rain is going to be pushed up against the mountains of Mexico. It's going to rain out a lot. And then the wind that's pushing onshore will also help keep storm surge bubbled up. So there will be intense flooding over the area around where John makes landfall and land masses surrounding it. So a large amount of southern Mexico will experience large-scale flash flooding and landslides from John as we move into tomorrow and through into Wednesday. But rain's beginning is, I believe, happening now. So flooding is probably already ongoing in these areas right now. Heavy rainfall will likely cause significant to possibly catastrophic, life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides to the Mexican states of Chiapas, Oaxaca, and Guerrero, in particular areas near the coast. So that's the key messages from National Hurricane Center. This is the official cone. The experimental cone they don't have it here. They don't have it here, unfortunately. But the cone takes a major hurricane right into Oaxaca within the next 12 hours. But it could easily be stronger than this. And then by Wednesday the storm dissipates over this part of Mexico. Now, as we move on, we'll look at forecast discussion. 120 is what it's expected to be in 12 hours. I do not believe 120 is going to be the final estimate here. The storm is intensifying very quickly now. The storm's probably already at 115 if we look at microwave imagery, which I'm about to show you in a minute. I would say, at least from what we're seeing right now, based off microwave imagery, which shows us the inner core of John right here, it already has a solid core. It already has a decent eye wall that's already fully developed. It's not going to take much time for it to become a major hurricane if it's not already one. So it will probably be much stronger than 120. I'm betting around maybe 150, probably max, before landfall. It really depends on how much land interaction John has before it makes a final landfall in southern Mexico. The more land interaction it has and the faster it makes landfall, the less intense it will be at landfall. But if it has a little bit more time, it may be able to get closer to upper end Cat 4 status, maybe Cat 5 in the absolute worst case scenario. But that does not change the impacts that much because there's a lot of heavy rain, and you will still have strong winds, and you will have a storm that's intensified up to landfall fairly quickly, which not many people actually know about. So the impacts, regardless of whether John is a 165 mile per hour Cat 5, a 140 mile per hour Cat 4 at landfall, that does not change the overall impacts that much. I would still prepare for a catastrophic hurricane landfall in southern Mexico. And you must prepare now. You do not have time if you live in Mexico. Switching gears to PTC 9, which should become a threat to the Yucatan, Cuba very soon, but will become a eventual threat to the United States within 4 days, around Thursday, Friday time frame. PTC 9 is organized, but it is still broad as of right now. However, due to the environmental conditions that are expected over the next 3 to 4 days, a lot of the models have shown a hurricane solution and potentially major hurricane solutions. Especially the hurricane models have shown Category 4 to potentially Category 5 solutions, but majority show at least Cat 3, Cat 4 within the Gulf of Mexico. Now, there are some wildcards that can be thrown into this that could change future Helene's intensity in the future. One is John, which we just mentioned. Wind shear from John could impart a little bit of shear over the system, while it's still in the Caribbean and slow down its ability to develop an inner core. If Helene's able to develop an inner core quickly, faster in the Caribbean, before it shoots the Yucatan Channel, if it's able to do that, then that would mean that Helene will have a much better organization and be able to take advantage of the very warm water underneath it. It will be able to take advantage of the jet max to the north, which will ventilate the storm more, and it will have a humid environment. So, how much organization PTC 9, which will become Helene, how much organization that storm received right now will determine how strong it will be at landfall. Because a stronger storm that enters the Gulf will have more ability to intensify and take advantage of all environmental circumstances. Now, we will flip over to, I believe, these are it, not these. PTC 9 will start with the cone of uncertainty, and we'll probably switch over to experimental cone on later dates. But for right now, PTC 9 is expected to shoot the gap between the Yucatan and Cuba. A further west hook here could bring hurricane force winds over the Yucatan. A further right hook could bring hurricane force winds over southwest Cuba. No, not southwest Cuba. This is technically northwest Cuba. Over northwest Cuba, and maybe the island of Youth as well. After it does so, it is expected to become a hurricane on Wednesday afternoon, as it's in the Gulf of Mexico. And then it moves up over the Gulf Stream and into the Gulf, where it may make a landfall on Thursday or maybe Friday, maybe around on Thursday. If the storm is as fast as we see it here, somewhere along the Florida coast, or on the Florida Panhandle to Big Bend, or just north of Tampa. A lot of different possibilities can happen here. The degree of the track can change and everything, because the population density of this part of Florida, Big Bend, is very low compared to around where Tampa is. Any slight deviation in track could be the difference in billions of dollars to potentially tens of billions of dollars in damage. The margins here are very small. It's not going to take much of a track shift to change how much damage is going to occur from the storm. And then even after the storm makes a landfall, it will be moving quite quickly. So strong hurricane force winds will be pulled northward into the southeast United States and cause significant wind damage. We will also look at rainfall. Heavy rainfall is also expected to plume up into the southeastern United States. We're looking at least officially, according to the NHC and Storm Prediction Center, we're seeing about 4 inches of rain over a wide swath of area, into Georgia and around the landfall point in and around the Big Bend. Heavy rain along the west coast of Florida, and just 8 to 12 inches just offshore that can easily be brought onshore. And later on, after the storm makes landfall, we see heavy rainfall rates along the southern Appalachian Mountains, or Appalachian Mountains, however you want to pronounce it. This will lead to flooding. I believe, in fact, that there is a moderate risk for flash flooding if I pull this up. There's a moderate risk for flash flooding on day 3 along the Florida Panhandle and in this Big Bend around Tallahassee. And then also the slight risk of flash flooding extends a large amount around that. So flash flooding could be a big issue in addition to the wind that's coming around with the center of Helene. Key messages: the disturbance disturbance PTC9 is forecast to intensify and be near hurricane strength when it reaches the far northwestern Caribbean Sea, basically the Yucatan Channel, on Tuesday night. Tropical storm conditions are expected over portions of the western Cuba, northeastern coast of the Yucatan, with hurricane conditions possible if it develops in the inner core faster and if it's closer to land. So, if you live in around Cancun or in western Cuba, it would be very good of you to make sure that you're preparing for at least tropical storm conditions, and also maybe prepare for some hurricane conditions as well, just to be safe. The system is expected to intensify into a major hurricane before it approaches the northeastern Gulf Coast, which is around where Florida is, where northwest Florida is. While it's too soon to pinpoint the exact location and magnitude of the impacts, the potential for a life-threatening storm surge and damaging hurricane-force winds along the coast of the Florida Panhandle and the Florida West Coast is increasing. Storm surge and hurricane watches will be issued for a portion of that area tonight or Tuesday morning, and residents should ensure they have a hurricane plan in place. Heavy rain and flooding are also possible in the Caribbean, so also prepare for this too. Okay, as far as people who are in the Gulf Coast, I would say now is the time you need to prepare right now. I would say prepare, make sure you have all the supplies, and be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice. Be ready now, because there's only about 3 days from now to landfall. That's not much time. It is important to make sure you have all your preparations done, medical records, everything. Get everything that you need done, and make sure you're able to evacuate safely. If you're trying to evacuate, it's important to make sure that you are evacuating to a place that is not, well, obviously away from storm surge. That's what you're evacuating from. But you also want to move to an area that's not going to be wrecked by wind damage, heavy wind damage from the storm. And you also want to be evacuating to an area where flooding from rainfall will not be a significant risk. So if we look at rainfall here, a good place to evacuate if you're in, for example, the Big Bend, for example, maybe evacuating towards Orlando or the east coast of Florida may be beneficial for you. If you're in the western Panhandle, evacuating towards Alabama may be beneficial for you. If you're in the coast of Tampa, the storm moves closer to you, maybe evacuating further south would be a good idea. But please make sure that if you are in the Big Bend, I wouldn't recommend evacuating into Georgia due to wind damage, as the storm's going to be moving quite quickly. So the winds are not going to weaken that much over land. So it would be very important to avoid, especially where the center would be going, and especially the rainfall too. So that's just some advice for evacuation. Now, as far as the earliest times winds could arrive, earliest reasonable time that winds could arrive in the majority around the northern Gulf Coast is Thursday at 8 a.m. for tropical storm force winds. Helene will probably be a large hurricane, so you'll feel the tropical storm force winds and the storm surge effects before the actual core gets to you. For around up to Tampa, earliest reasonable time is 8 p.m. Wednesday, and for the Keys of Florida is 8 a.m. And as for people in the Caribbean, almost all the times are within Tuesday. So almost everyone in the Caribbean will be experiencing tropical storm force. Not everyone in the Caribbean, but everyone in the Northwest Caribbean around the Yucatan and Cuba. Almost everyone will be experienced or have experienced tropical storm force winds by Tuesday at 8 p.m. But if we're looking at the most likely scenario for when tropical storm force winds move in, it is likely that tropical storm force winds fully move into most of Florida by Thursday at 8 a.m. And it's likely that the Gulf Coast of Florida will experience tropical storm force winds around Thursday afternoon, the very beginning. In the Caribbean, the most likely time that tropical storm force winds will arrive is Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So I'd still prepare today. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. So prepare today, and as much as you can tomorrow. By the time you're getting into tomorrow afternoon, it's time to begin sheltering in place. If you are in Florida or on maybe Alabama coast, if the storm moves a little bit further west than what is forecast, it's very important to prepare now. Build all the fortifications against the wind you need now, and make sure that you have your plans to evacuate pretty much within a day. Evacuating as early as possible is the goal here. You need to make sure that you are evacuating prepared early. So, as far as we're going to talk for Helene, we'll look at the model guidance. For John, we're not going to look at model guidance specifically because John is a smaller system and the models will underperform on the system. So we are going to zoom in on the Western Atlantic. We're going to start with the GFS run, and we're going to move to other models. This is the 18Z run, so we're going to show the next 5 days. That's all we need to show. So as you can see, we have Helene PTC 9 in the Northwest Caribbean. As we take this into time, 24 hours from now, we have the storm still organizing, but it may be a tropical storm by this point, approaching the Yucatan and approaching approaching the coast of Cuba. As we move further, the storm organizes more, starts organizing really quickly as it shoots the Yucatan Gap. 989 tropical storm, maybe low-end Category 1 hurricane. This is the reason why hurricane watches are in effect for these areas. While in the Eastern Pacific, John's heavy rains are still raining very hard across southern Mexico. As we move into the beginning of Thursday, now Helene, what would be Helene here, is starting to intensify very rapidly, and the pressure is really starting to fall as it's moving towards a landfall. On the GFS run, this is a 966 millibar storm that's making landfall in the Big Bend, Florida, the western Big Bend, Florida. However, this will still send a large storm surge into Tampa Bay and for most of the Big Bend. That's just the GFS run. And then after we see a large amount of wind. We see the storm doesn't weaken much as it moves into Georgia. We have this large wind field and this heavy rain that's moving into southern Georgia. So it's important to not evacuate in southern Georgia because of this. The winds will still be strong. The rain will be heavy, so flooding will be likely. So it's still likely that you'll still see maybe major hurricane impacts far inland from the system. And then as we keep going on to the day on Friday, the storm degrades more over Georgia and into Carolinas, but still dropping a lot of heavy rain, and then it begins really breaking up. But that's still, from landfall at around 0Z on Friday to 12 hours later, that's still an intense 12-hour period of intense winds over the continental United States, over Georgia, Florida, and into South Carolina, as well as heavy rain. this is not a good scenario. If we looked at the CMC model, which is a Canadian model, for example, we'll back it up. 24 hours from now, we have a tropical storm in the Western Caribbean. Right as it shoots the Yucatan Gap is when intensification picks up the most. As the Canadian model shows, getting into the Gulf of Mexico and turning northeastward, it begins intensifying quickly. And on this run, CMC is a bit further west, a weaker system, 975 millibar storm at landfall. However, if we look at hurricane models, which we'll do in a second, you can see much stronger. As for the ICON model, we'll loop back here. The ICON model still has that tropical storm in the Western Caribbean, but almost every single model has intensification really ramping up in and around the Yucatan Channel, and then the rapid intensification really begins once the storm until it enters the Gulf. And on the ICON model, this is a worst case scenario for Tampa in terms of track, as the storm's angle is moving right. It's going to make a landfall north of the city. It's going to make a landfall in the southern part of Big Bend. So it's going to force all of this storm surge into the bay, and also it's going to force storm surge into areas all around southwest Florida as well that were impacted by Ian 2 years ago. That does not mean the center will move over you, but that means strong high water levels from the ocean will be pushing onto land. Now, why are the models showing this? We'll look at the GFS, right? But we're going to look at upper dynamics. We already know sea surface temperatures here. Sea surface temperatures in a large amount of this area are 30 degrees Celsius, 30 to 31 degrees Celsius or warmer. Close to the coast is closer to 29, 30. But as you can see, in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico, whatever Helene right here has strong outflow to its north to fan out and evacuate air from its center. It has this equatorward flow that's allowing it to breathe out southwest. However, there could be some shear issues with John. This will impact how fast it organizes. But overall in the Gulf of Mexico, whatever intensity Helene is right here, will have a great environment to intensify because there's no shear directly over it. And then it makes landfall. As for, and if we check on other models like the CMC for example, we see similar things. Not much shear, and this jet max helps fan out the system, intensifies faster. ICON, similar thing. Not much wind shear over the system. Jet max helps it intensify. Now, if we look at hurricane models, which we will now, moisture is also good, so I'll also show that for a little bit. I can't show it here, but GFS could probably show it. Moisture, at least for the system, will not really be a problem. Moisture for Helene will be very good. Now, shear as it's approaching the coastline may impact the storm's intensity, as some dry air may get trained in with the shear helping. But as Helene's intensifying quickly here, that should allow it to make a moisture bubble similar to what Ian did 2 years ago, and not be affected by this dry air until it actually makes landfall. So, Helene won't actually feel this dry air until it makes landfall, and then it begins disintegrating over land. So, while Helene's over the Gulf of Mexico, moisture should not be a problem for the system. We'll look at 3 of the hurricane models, and then we'll end the video. For 9L, we will look at thermodynamics. I'll actually look at the HAFS A parent instead of the HMOD for now. For the HAFS A parent, we will look at sea surface temperatures. Like I said, as far as sea surface temperatures are concerned, a large amount of Gulf of Mexico is 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. Close to the coast is 29, and right up against the coast is 28. However, Helene moves over this, and these are some of the warmest and deepest, some of the warmest water, some of the warmest and deepest waters in the Gulf, in terms of how far that one water goes down. The HAFS A is already showing maybe overperforming here. The HAFS A has PTC 9 already as a major hurricane entering the Gulf within 2 days. That's how good the environment could be potentially. Now, will it do it this fast considering PTC 9 right now isn't that organized? Doubtful. But it shows the potential is there. And as Helene moves into the Gulf more, we see an 899 millibar system right off the coast of Florida. This is absurdly low, and this is definitely a Category 5. Is this likely to happen? No, but it shows you the level, how good the environment is. The water is very warm. The environment is almost perfect until it starts approaching land. And then we have a 900 millibar landfall in the Big Bend. A little bit further west, this does matter. And then strong hurricane force winds that will move over pretty much all of southern Georgia. If we were to look at the HAFS, we'll add moisture back as well. Just to see whether the model is overdoing it. But as you can see, moisture, dry air does try to get in, so this may limit it. But Helene's able to keep this moisture bubble, and it doesn't matter by the time it makes landfall. If we look at the HAFS B, which we will do right now, parent, and then we'll look at the H-bond and the H-wharf. Same similar story. PTC 9 right now in 12 hours, but it really starts getting its act together within a day and becomes a major hurricane before it even enters the Gulf. If this were to happen, there's not much really stopping Helene after this point. But even a strong tropical storm or a hurricane by this point would still allow Helene to rapidly intensify and become a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. It has to be as an 893, a bit overdoing it, especially with this dry air trying to entrain. But you can still see the general idea. A very strong storm, a weakening trend before landfall, maybe due to dry air and some increased shear. But you still see the general landfall, the general trend. Major hurricane landfall around the Big Bend, a large fetch of wind off the Gulf of Mexico, forcing all that water onto land, and then after landfall, intense winds over southern Georgia that can take out power to millions of people, right? And then the rainfall threat afterward. This is overdoing it, I feel, but we'll look at the H-wharf parent for 9L as well. H-wharf is more realistic with its forecast. So H-wharf has PTC 9 here, intensifies it into a hurricane, but almost major hurricane as it's crossing further east. But now we have a major hurricane in the Gulf that deepens to a 930 millibar storm, but then slows down as dryish sort of training in here, as you guys can see. It's starting to train in here. And then after that point, it makes landfall further east in the Big Bend. I think it's actually in the same spot, but in the Big Bend, it's a 933 millibar Cat 4, Cat 5, around there. And then, still the same scenario. Very strong winds to southern Georgia. Major hurricane force winds in southern Georgia that go on for hours as the storm pulls up through the state. That alone, the wind damage alone, will be catastrophic from the system, not including storm surge, which will be very high here anyway due to the storm being large and its intensity. This storm, at least looking alone by this, will be a catastrophe. The main thing in the Big Bend is that this population area is low, but even still, the damage potential of the storm is very high, especially if it moves a little bit further east. It does not need to make a landfall in Tampa. If it moves even further east into the Big Bend where it's close to the Cedar Key, that's just enough. That's just enough to funnel even more water into the bend. Tallahassee, it could be an issue for Tallahassee as well. If it takes a further west track, it could be a further issue for the Panhandle. It really depends on the angle of the track and where his upper level low is. But as you guys can see, at least from all these auto runs I have shown you, the big takeaway, and I'm going to go back to this, and this is how I'm going to end the video. The big takeaway for future Helene is how strong it is when it's entering the Gulf of Mexico, how much it takes advantage of how much it takes advantage of the great environment over eastern Gulf of Mexico, the warm sea surface temperatures, the low wind shear, and the humid atmosphere. And then after that point, once it's making landfall in and around the Big Bend, the Panhandle to the Big Bend, and just north of Tampa, it's how much it maintains that strength and how fast it's moving into Georgia. And then that will bring heavy rain, major hurricane force winds far inland, which will lead to a lot of power outages, and a large storm surge. So, the big takeaway is how strong Helene gets now. Well, rather, it's not Helene yet, but it will be. How organized PTC 9 is, by the time it gets to tomorrow, how much it organizes in the Gulf of Mexico, how large the system is, and then exactly where it makes landfall in Florida will determine pretty much everything, from damage to intensity. The only real wild card here that we could see, two potential wild cards: wind shear from John cutting across the system, making it not intensify as quickly, and potential dry air coming in off North America into the Gulf that could potentially disrupt the system as it's approaching land and may induce a weakening trend before landfall. But that is not guaranteed. Right? So, hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something from it. I know this video feels kind of rushed, although it's still probably 30 minutes. I try to get as much as I could for you guys because it's very important for me to get out. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. Learn something. Prepare for Helene. If you're in Mexico, prepare for John as best as you can. I know John's intensifying as we speak. Whenever I drop this video, it's intensifying as I'm speaking right now. It's stronger. It's probably going to be stronger by the time I upload this video than when I am talking about it right now. But prepare. There's not much time in Mexico, and there's somewhat time in the Gulf if you're on the northern Gulf Coast, but you really only have 3 days. That's not much time. You have to hit the ground running. You gotta get preparations done. You have to get stuff done before the storm is too close and it's too late to do anything. Alright guys, I'll see you guys in another video. You guys see discover stuff up here. I'm about to talk about that right now. See ya.